Hello, welcome to the July 3rd, 2023 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream. And if you've not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can submit questions by entering them in the chat field, or you can send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So if it's a more involved question, you can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, you realize that my ability to answer questions in kind of a real-time manner may be eclipsed depending on the number of questions, but we'll try to get through each of the questions chronologically in order that they were asked. If you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could refrain from asking the same question over and over again, we will get to the question. So if you don't see an immediate response, it may be just coming down the line, sometimes 20 to 30 minutes later. So if you could please be a little patient, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase it is, whether it's version 10, 10.5, or 11, 12, or if it is in which level of Cubase, so whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. That information is also helpful along with the operating system that you're currently using. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. So you can look for topics there, so you can quickly navigate to particular topics. If you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, we're almost 27,000-ish questions now in the last 3 years or so. You can go to cubaseindex.com. You want to give a special thanks to Jan for all of his help in creating that website. It's a wonderful resource. Another great resource of information for the Steinberg community is the Cubase Nation Discord, and that's Jazz Dude does a lot of work in compiling that. So if you're looking for particular tutorials or files to download, that is an additional resource that's really valuable to the Steinberg community. We also have 2 moderators that serve on the live stream. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just really do this out of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better community place. So we'll give special thanks to them. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm based outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So, if you are watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. We know it's kind of a holiday tomorrow in the United States, so in lieu of our normal Tuesday live stream, we moved it up so we could get the live stream in today. So I appreciate everyone's schedule being flexible for today's live stream, but we want to make sure that we get 2 in, and then we'll be back on our normal schedules of Tuesday and Friday for the rest of the month of July. So with that, let's go ahead and get questioned. All right, so the first question is from Patrick. He asks, is there a free trial for Spectral Layers Pro 10? So it was just released last week. So usually the trial version comes like 4 to 6 weeks after the initial release. So currently I don't believe that there is a trial for Spectral Layers Pro 10. Okay, so we see from Patrick, and if there isn't, is there a special upgrade price for existing Cubase users? So if you have a Spectral Layers Elements, like version, Spectral Layers Elements or Spectral Layers Pro, there's a discounted upgrade with that. There isn't a discounted upgrade from Spectral Layers 1, which is the version that's bundled with Cubase. And so with that, you would, so since you didn't purchase that separately as a separate license, there isn't a special upgrade version of that. So, but if you have Spectral Layers Elements or Spectral Layers Pro in versions 8 or 9 or previous versions, you can get a discount on your update to that. But since you didn't buy a separate license of Spectral Layers Elements or Pro, if you're just using the Spectral Layers 1, there isn't special upgrade pricing for that since you never had a standalone license. Okay, so we see Patrick just saying, I think I've already mentioned it once, but I see more and more DAWs adding a feature to save different project versions on a per project level. I haven't yet found a workaround. I would love for it to be heard by the Steinberg developer team, as I think it's a feature would be highly beneficial to us producers. I'll gladly send an email elaborating on this idea. Could you forward my request? So I'll definitely forward it. And all you have to do is send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So there's a lot of different interpretations of what different project versions could be. And so, so instead of me kind of stumbling around to see if that's exactly what you wanted to do, if you want to send a detailed email, I'd be happy to respond to that. And once again, send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see Stefan checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. We have Travel Launch sending blessings from Jamaica as a Cubase Pro user. Thanks for joining us today. We have the Heartbreak Time Machines. Says sometimes when using a high-pass filter, I see frequencies underneath the threshold. This usually happens when I have plugins running on his channel. How do I set this to make sure no frequencies under the filter get in the mix? So when we're working with a particular, high-pass filter, so let's take a look. I think we can probably even show it just on this drum part here. So let's open up our channel view. So let's say we'll go to our pre section and let's go to our low cut filter here. So as we enable this, we can see that, depending upon this lip, it may still seem, some frequencies may still pass depending on, so depending on the scope, that you're kind of using for it. So, like when you go into the low cut, so if you're, this is before the processing is going into the inserts. So if we wanted to do this now, if your inserts are adding that back in, then you may want to just come over, so if now we're processing through plugins and that's generating low-end information after it's been cut, which could happen, you may want to just run a separate, EQ. So let's say even if you do like a frequency and place this after the particular inserts. So let's say if we go, we'll make this a low, we'll make it a 96 dB cut. So as we do this, that, so again, that if when we do it from the channel EQ, other plugins could add low-end frequency information after that. So it may kind of resynthesize depending upon the plugins. So like if you have something that's like a sub-harmonic synthesizer or something like that, so it may be just kind of adding those frequencies in, and this is cutting before it hits the inserts. So you may want to investigate just running an insert afterwards that would just come over here and you could do a steep cut. So if we say let's cut 6 dB or 12 dB, 24, 48 or 96 dB, that will pretty much get a lot of the information out. But check to make sure that your plugins aren't adding low-end information, and then you may just have to adjust the filter after whatever plugins are being kind of added to the project or to the file. Always wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. We see Benny checking in from Sweden, and Jazz Dude. All right, and we see Nick. It was wonderful to see Nick on the Zoom meetup on Friday, so I had a really good time, enjoyed that quite a bit. All right, so we see Jan from Cubase Index in Stockholm, so thanks for being on. We see Patrick just apologizing for posting his question before the saying hi to everyone, so you don't have to worry about it. So, but we're just glad you're on. And Nick says Monday is a new Tuesday for 1 week only. So just want to make sure we're able to get the live stream, 2 live streams in this week. All right, so we have Sounds Like Matt checking in from Chicago in the United States. Thanks for everyone. We have Alter Ego wishing peace to everyone. And we have Mark Rabin checking in from Montana. See sounds from Matt in Chicago. It's his first day of clear sky after weeks of smoke in Chicago area. Yeah, the pictures looked very bad that I saw, and our sky is finally clear here in Washington, a little bit outside Washington, D.C. All right, so we see from Ecstasy Tunes, hi Greg, how can I send feature requests for Cubase 13? So you could always send them to me. I believe if you go to the Steinberg forum that you could send feature requests there. So I realize that sometimes when, just to give a bit of perspective, sometimes, you know, if you send a feature request a couple months before a version, you know, don't feel like you were neglected in not having a feature implemented for a new version. Sometimes there's feature lock on new features, you know, several months, you know, 3 to 4 months, sometimes even longer before the version is released. So, but you can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'm happy to pass it along. All right, so we have, so wonderful to see Mark Ludmer checking in from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Enjoyed seeing all your pictures of your gig in Dubai. So wonderful to have Mark on. Mark is one of the best people in the MI industry. You know, I think he's taking a little detour and doing some other stuff, and relocated from Los Angeles to Michigan, and is doing work in other industries, but was a wonderful person for the MI industry. Okay, Dallas LaRue asks, can you explain the difference between grid relative, events, and shuffle, and what is adapt to zoom? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at some of our different grid modes here. Okay, so let's say our first mode, let's go ahead and just do adapt to zoom. So we could do adapt to zoom for our different events. So let's say I'm at a zoom level like this where we see every bar. So now as I snap, as I move the event and snap is enabled, it will automatically snap it to the bar position. Now if I zoom in some more, so let's say now we can see as I do this, it will snap to quarter notes because we've zoomed in more. But if we zoom out, let's say we zoom out again, I look at this, as I move the event, it's going to just snap to the bars automatically. Let's come here, and now we have the adapt to zoom. It's going to snap to quarter notes. We zoom in further, now it can snap to 16th notes. And as we zoom in even higher levels, we're now snapping to, looks like 32nd notes. So depending on the level of your zoom, that will just dictate the snap value for you. So that's what the adapt to zoom does. Now let's say I have my, currently it's set to grid. Let me clear my throat. So currently it's set to grid. So now if I want to just come over here, and we can see that my grid is set, I'm in, my master grid line is set to bars and beats. And if I set this to seconds, now it's going to snap to seconds. So it's going to snap to the grid line. So I go back to bars and beats. Now we can snap to the bar, but let's say my event was slightly off time. Okay, so now if we choose to snap to grid relative, this means I want to snap it relative to the space between the event and the grid. So as I move it at this point, it doesn't snap directly to the grid, but whatever the amount of space was between those two events, it is going to just simply maintain that space, but still base that difference, but and that's what the relative is. It's the difference of where it was to where the grid is. So if we have something that needs to be offset from the grid, you can just offset it and just have the relative value. When we are in events, let's say now if I shuffle, I'll duplicate this event a couple times. I'll move this here. So if my event is kind of in the middle of not really tied to a particular grid, and now as I move the event, this event can kind of butt up or just kind of snap directly to the particular event here, regardless. So it's going to snap to kind of the event boundaries as opposed to the particular grid or a grid with a relative offset. So now this event will just simply snap to the event as opposed to the grid. Now when we get into shuffle, I'll just kind of switch the color of one particular part here. And let's say we're going to put this into shuffle mode. What this is going to allow me to do is once we're in shuffle mode, is as soon as I place this kind of in front, so if I wanted to kind of flip the order of these two events, instead of moving this over, then moving that one over, we can just kind of come over here. I drag this event over, and that event will just the two events will kind of swap places. So now there's two events. And also if we are in if I make let's say I do a range selection and I'm in shuffle mode and I hit the backspace key or delete, if we are in grid mode, that event will leave a space. But if we are in shuffle mode, at this point, I delete that space, the events afterward will kind of move over to the left to fill in this space. And then we could also snap to cursor. So if we wanted to just come right over here, I could say, wherever my cursor is, and let me just turn off one quick preference to show this. All right, so if I wanted this to the end of this event to snap to where the cursor position is or the beginning, regardless of where that's at. So if you go, okay, this is right where it is in the video, so I need to move that sound effect or that audio file right directly to where the cursor position is. So those are the different snap types. Let me know if that's helpful, and you could also combine these. So if you want kind of different combinations where you may want to do grid and cursor or events and cursor or grid plus events and cursor, you could have kind of multiple conditions kind of active simultaneously. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Dallas. And it's always wonderful to see you on the live stream. Dallas is always really good at getting his questions in early. All right, so we have music for World Peace Records. We have Taylor checking in from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. So glad you made it. Enjoyed seeing all your pictures of your trip out west, especially to Wyoming and Grand Tetons, beautiful part of America. All right, so Ted Carpenter asks, can you demonstrate how to remove the vocals and any artifacts from a mixed down song and just keep the music? Okay. All right. So let me just open up project. I think we have. See if it's still on recent projects. Okay, so we could do this in conjunction with Spectral Layers 1, which comes with Cubase 12. There's also Spectral Layers Elements and Spectral Layers Pro that do this, and some of those functions were oh, sorry, I'll just do new projects, not the one I was thinking of. All right, so I'll just import like a 2-track mix. Okay, so we'll listen to it just so you get kind of an idea what's going on. All right, so what we're going to do is to launch Spectral Layers. So, and you could install Spectral Layers 1, which has the unmixed capability for vocals. The Elements and Pro version have kind of a, capabilities of doing more than just vocals. And this is version 10, so the algorithm has been slightly improved in version 10, but this will be kind of the same principle. So I'm just going to say, let's remove the vocals. I'll make it best quality, and we'll just hit OK. So as we do this, we're just going to take this particular song, and I often make the analogy, this is like taking the eggs out of the cake after the cake has been cooked. Let it do its magic. So we could actually kind of do this for the different instruments if you wanted to as well, and even break apart drums. All right, let's take just a couple minutes. All right, so what we're doing is Nick is from the UK is wishing everyone a happy 4th of July to everyone in the US and the Club Cubase family. It's very kind. All right, about almost 40% done with this. We have Steve Lead saying hi from San Francisco Bay Area. All right, and then we have Sable Winters. We're glad that you were so dedicated to make the Zoom meetup while you're driving to a wedding last week, also from Bay Area. Great to see you on, Sable. All right, we see Ted just an addendum to this question that we're doing. It says using Spectral Layers 9 is the addendum to my question about removing vocals. So, all right, we're about 60% done. It says using different AI technologies to automatically extract the different elements in a mix. All right, about 3/4 done. All right, getting there, just about done. All right, almost done. All right, you can hear that this had effects on it, so let's say. All right, so what it's done is basically broken it into layers.
What can I say to you? Never felt the
It's a backing track.
had to come see you, couldn't settle for less. I couldn't believe when she smiled and said yes. What can I
And then if you want it, so once it's broken down into layers, you could drag the layer into the project. And at this point now you can see that the vocals are going to be just isolated on its own independent track. So once again, go to, you'll see under the unmix, and it may be called, I think they changed, so you go to unmix, and then, at that point you could just, I don't think it's called song, but I think you get unmixed vocals is what it's labeled as. So give that a try. Works kind of way better than it should. Go ahead, remove that extension. All right. There you see Patrick says, thanks for answering all your questions. No problems. That's why we do these. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so we see from Rich, yes, hi Greg, I have a session with lots of audio takes and Midi, but when I try to half the tempo of the session, the audio goes out of sync. Is there a way to get the audio to follow the new tempo? So what you want to do is just to make sure that the audio itself is in musical mode. So as it's been recorded into Cubase, you want to, again, just make sure that this particular file, so let's say if we play this back, activate this project. So as we play this back, we can hear. All right, so once that, if you've recorded the audio into Cubase, it's going to be tempo stamped. So what you want to do is to make sure that select the audio event, and you could turn it on into musical mode right here. So let's say, okay, we're at 100 beats a minute. Now whatever tempo I type in, the audio will kind of just follow. So I guess let's go to 80 beats a minute. Let's go to 50 beats a minute. Let's go to 100. So just make sure that the audio files that you have them selected, that they are in musical mode. And you could also do this if you go to Control or Command plus the letter P, as in pool. You can see all of the different audio files in the project, and then you could place them into musical mode. And if you don't have the origin tempo set, that's what it'll use for kind of to figure out what tempo to play back. It needs kind of an origin tempo. Again, that's included when you record audio into the program. But if you don't see the tempo information here in the particular, for the particular files, you may want to enter that. And you could just check musical mode, and then whatever tempo you have, the audio will stretch to play back at that particular tempo. Okay, so we see a question, what is auto apply on direct offline processing? Okay, so let's say I have, I want to do offline processing on this. So I would hit F7, and this opens our direct offline processing. We'll just come over here, so we'll go to our direct offline processing. So when we have auto apply turned on, so let's say now I want to select a plugin. So what we're going to do is to basically render this particular plugin into the file itself. Now when auto apply is turned on, what this will do is as soon as we tell it what function to do, now when I click auto apply, that automatically will apply that particular process to it. So if I do, let's say, a process and I want to reverse, we can see that as soon as I select a function with auto apply, that the file, that function or that process or plugin has automatically been applied to it without me having to turn it on. Just turning it, just selecting it processes it. So without auto apply check, I would say, okay, reverse, and then click on apply, and then it's going to reverse. But with auto apply disable, I come over here, we hit reverse. It's not going to do it until we actually tell it to do that particular function. So the auto apply into direct offline processing, as soon as you load the plugin or the process, it'll just automatically apply it to the selected file. And if that's not set, you would have to just initiate it differently. Let me know if that makes sense. See, Heartbreak Time Machine says thank you regarding frequency cuts and high pass filter. We see Heartbreak Time Machine is going to pay more attention to the slope for sure. So, all right, we have Rob Hansen checking in from Minnesota. Thanks for joining us today. Used to always love going to St. Paul and Minneapolis. Used to be part of my territory years ago. Okay, so we see from Ed Ednock asks, hi Greg, why can't I hear audio from the presets? Thanks. So I'm not sure which presets it is. If you're trying to do preset loops. So if you're like auditioning loops and you wanted to listen, so like as you just kind of click on, so you could just come over here. Now if it's going to be with different effects, or if it's instruments, so let's say if I was doing, so if it's an instrument preset, you could come over here and say, okay, now I want to go to retro log, and if we say, okay, I want to come over here to retro log 2, so this will kind of load up the instrument in the background. So as I just navigate down, I go, that's the sound I like. Now I could just double click and that's going to load the instrument and the track and carry the preset name. And if it's an effect preset, so let's say if I have an insert here and I have like the insert window open, so let's say, okay, I want it to go to different reverbs, and let's say in Revelation, and we're playing along. That you could just kind of, you could double click here to load up different, you just click once and you could audition through different presets. So a couple different ways of hearing presets, but maybe you could specify what type of presets that you want it to specifically to hear. That would be helpful. And a lot of times if it's just going to be loops, and this is a question we get a lot, if you go to, I want to just audition my different loops and I'm not hearing these, at that point, make sure that you have it set to automatically play an audition, and that these loops go through generally the control room. So make sure if you're in Cubase Pro that you go to your audio connections under Studio, and that you have the control room activated, and that you're using a monitor here. And this would be like your stereo out, and this seems counterintuitive at first, but instead of double busing, we could just have the stereo out defined and selected as not connected. Right. Wonderful to see Roger Cabo on, and we have Anteas. Glad you can make it. All right, so we have Semog mixing and mastering engineers saying hello to everyone. Always great to see Charles K on. Glad you can make it today. And if you do learn a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. That enables us to continue to offer the live streams. You see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, we have shuffle mode. So yeah, we'll give you that feature free. So that'll be your 4th of July present from Steinberg. So as soon as you turn on your Cubase next time, it's automatically going to be active for you. All right, so you see, dear Greg, I have a feature request. Wouldn't it be great to have a range tool in the Midi editor window? So I agree with that. I requested it myself numerous times. One thing, if you needed to use it as a workaround, I noticed a workaround if you use the in-place editor. So let's say if I have this event selected, I hit Control, Shift, or Command plus Shift plus the letter I for like in-place. That, or maybe it's all right. So if you're using the in-place editor, and where this comes in handy is if I wanted to take like this range of notes and duplicate them, because currently we can select the notes and duplicate the selected notes. So let's say if I wanted to take these notes, and if I hit Control or Command D to duplicate, it's just going to line up directly after the last note because we're not working with the range. But if we, on the in-place editor, if we switch to, let's say, our range tool, we can now duplicate and keep the range. So I know it's not in the editor. You can do it in the in-place editor, but I'll pass that along again. I've passed that along as well. And you can hit Control or Command Shift I to open and close the editor. So if you need to do it in a pinch, you could use the in-place editor, but I know Steinberg is aware of that particular feature request. All right, so Ninja just says, I'm having trouble. His question is, I'm having trouble with mixdowns in Cubase where there's some audio missing and crackling sound in the rendered mixdown. When I do real-time rendering, my CPU gets overloaded. So one of the things to do, and something that's not necessarily as obvious when you're doing a mixdown, even if it's real-time, or if you're doing kind of offline, if your CPU's kind of getting hit really hard, go to your studio setup, select your audio interface, go to the control panel, and just make sure that your buffer for the audio interface is maxed out. And that will help with, if you're having CPU issues or you're kind of pushing the CPU envelope a bit too much on your particular project, make sure that the buffer is raised to the maximum amount, and that should make it go faster and give you more overhead when exporting. So give that a try if you haven't already. All right, so we see question. Hi, I'm a fan from the Netherlands. Can you edit existing WAV files once finished? So no MIDI to make new top 40 songs. Okay, just reading this again. So, can you edit existing WAV files once finished? So, no Midi to make new top 40 songs. So, if you've rendered, so let's say we have like, our particular Midi event here, and I render this, I go to edit to render in place. So, we'll go to our render settings, and I'll do this. So, now it's going to take that particular event and render it as an audio file. Even now it's rendered. If it's frozen, another methodology to do this is if it's frozen that you can't edit the event. But if you do a render in place, and you could render in place multiple files, multiple tracks simultaneously, that now that you're here, it's going to create our WAV file, and we could choose to have the source muted or disabled if you wanted to. But now we could come over and edit this particular file. So if you're not able to edit the file once you did a freeze, once you froze the track and did a freeze function, then you can't edit it. But if you just simply do a render in place, then the resulting file that's created can simply be edited as any other file. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding your question. All right, so we see, hi Greg, how can I connect Bluetooth AirPod headphones to Cubase 12? So once they are in, let me see, I don't have AirPods, but I think if I come over and let me open up, we'll see some Samsung Galaxy Buds here. All right, and let me see if they're, of course, I think the battery is down on them right now. But whatever system that you have, you could come over, and when you go to your studio setup, you just want to, at this point, you'll see, like if I had, like if my son was watching TV through our stereo receiver, that I could just simply send the audio over Bluetooth. Now, if you're not hearing it, it could be there's a lot of limitations with Bluetooth and how it's implemented. One of the issues gets to be that it may not, I think it only works at particular sample rates. So I think it only works at like 48K or 44.1. So it's actually kind of missing. So it could be either your sample rate isn't compatible with it, so that could be an issue with it, but you could, send audio out to it, and it will also have a lot of latency on it as well, just monitoring. So while a lot of people think it's great to, have wireless headphones, it could actually cause more problems, especially if you're tracking the latency. It could be like 45 milliseconds of latency added on top of everything else. So, all right, so we see Mark Rabin from Montana just saying, hey all, by the way, I did update to 0.70, 1207 and recorded some stuff yesterday, original stuff, and didn't notice anything, but I know it must be better. What changed? Did they include the Akai MPK 225? So I'm not sure if the Akai was included, but let's take a quick look. But I mean, you could obviously make one, so let's see if we have. So it looks like the 249, 261. But you may be able to just kind of, see if those are working, because that may be just kind of different variations of, like the 49 may have the same controls as the 25. So it was mostly, as far as changes, there's a lot of just little maintenance things. Like one of the things that Michael Pierce had run into that he pointed out on a live stream was when importing track archives that had audio routed to effect sends, where we wanted the tracks and the effects to be, exported as exported as selected tracks and imported as a track archive, that the connection between the audio going to the send was lost. So that was fixed, and just a lot of little other small issues like that. So it's mostly pretty much a typical maintenance release, just a lot of small little issues. All right, wonderful to see John Morales on the live stream. So I did get your email. I didn't get a chance to respond to it. I was kind of busy over the weekend, but I'll send a response probably later today. But it's nice to have you closer to. And if you want to do stuff kind of remotely for your Atmos setup, we can see how far we can get with that. But I may be able to sneak up. But we'll have to consult with my family. But we may be doing a trip to Delaware. So if we do that, we'll try to stop by. So Nick says we have a shortage of Michaels, so I think he wants Michael Pierce and Michael Teams to join on. He says if you hit the like button, they might be summoned to appear. So, and Michael Teams, everyone is always really thoughtful of, appreciates his ice cream. So, and it's a hot day for a lot of places in the United States. So we see from Filter Freak just saying Monday with a question mark. So it's only this week because it's a holiday tomorrow in the United States. So for 4th of July. So I didn't want to necessarily have to work on 4th of July. So I'm probably one of the few Americans that's working today. Most people have kind of taken the day off, even if they didn't officially do it. But so I wanted to make sure we got 2 live streams in this week. So that's why we're kind of doing a special Monday version of it. All right, so we see from Yassine just says we would love to see a portable Steinberg zip file for Mac and Windows for the C drive. Do you want and maybe this is with do you want the installer as a zip file, or do you want or is it just for the installation file, or is it with like where you don't want to use it? Because I think if you go to the Steinberg website and we just say, Cubase 12, here, let's go to Steinberg.net. So if you want to not use the Steinberg download assistant, and we come over here, we say, let's go to support. I think there's a download section where you could download it like from your web browser. So let's go to downloads. And say I want to download Cubase 12, Cubase Pro 12. And then here you could download I'm not sure if they're zipped files, but here you could download all the independent files. I believe that they are zipped, but if it's just for the installation, just go to the Steinberg website and then you could download from there, or you could download directly from using the Steinberg Download Assistant utility. All right, we see Mark Raven's going to check out for a little bit, take his dog Stella to the dog park. So that's a good thing to do. It's a good quality of life. everyone say hi to Stella and wish her well. Okay, so we see from Roger Cabo, hi Greg, when starting in cycle mode, Cubase start recording at the left locator. Well, is it possible to set a pre-record? Example, 2 bars, the record starts running 2 bars before the left locator. I think what you could do, let's say, I'll just do a new project here. Sorry. Okay, so let's say I put this in. I want my, let's say, 2 bars, and I have this in a cycle record. So I'm just going to come over here. Let's activate cycle record. Okay, now there is a preference in. So you go to your preferences and go to, I think it's under record and audio, that you could have an audio pre-record seconds. So I'm just going to set this to, so it's not in bars per se, but I'm going to say 3 seconds. Okay. And now let's say I punch in. So let's say I want to start recording, and I'm going to put it into a cycle record. Okay, so we see audio 1. Then we see take 2. Now we're in take 3. Take 4. Okay, so now when we look at this, well, we kind of see it perceived as being in lanes. So let's say we come over here, we open up, we can see the different lanes. But since we did this as a contiguous, constant recording, when we go to our pool window, what we do is we'll go to media, to our pool window, and we'll see that we're going to have our audio file here. So I'm just going to drag this file out to another file right here. So, and what it did is, we did 4 different passes, but as you do an audio recording, so we see that it actually captured 3 seconds beforehand. So if I'm doing, let's say, an audio recording, and we'll show this independent of the cycle. Once that pre-record is turned on, it's captured that information. So let's say I just start recording right at this point, and I stop. And if I wanted to pre-record before, you could now just simply roll this back in time, and you could have up to 60 seconds of audio that's captured before the cycle record. So it's not exactly 2 bars, but at this point, you could just, if you're in cycle mode, realize that you could have go to preferences and go to record to audio, and you could set the amount of time for pre-record. So it's just kind of capturing that data in the audio buffer. So again, preferences, record audio, it defaults to 1 second, but you could change that value. So let me know if that will help for you, Roger. All right, so we have Burak says, hi from Turkey. How can I apply LFO to any VST? Okay, so let's come over here. So we could use kind of a loop back, and this is could be a little, want to get it set up one time could be a little tricky to get, but I think it's not so bad once you know what to do. So just find a particular project here. Okay, so let's say I have a file here, and we'll just play this. Alright, and we just... Let's change the sound just a little bit here. Alright, so if we wanted to do, let's say we have LFOs here. Alright, let me just get this set up real quick. Bear with me just for a second. I'll just... Okay, so if we want to set up LFOs on kind of internal instruments, we could go to, so let's say on retro log here, so I have the pad sound. So if we go to the instrument, right, and we go to our Midi inserts, right, so I could turn on an LFO and say I want this LFO to control, let's say, panning. So what we can do is say, okay, we want this to be over a measure, and we want this to control MIDI 10. And let's say now, so that's MIDI CC 10 that's being transmitted. So now if I want to set my volume to go up and down the full range to, but I want to do it in eighth notes, or we set it to 16th notes. And now if I wanted to go to my bass part, and we can say we wanted this LFO. So we can say, okay, I want controller 16. I'm going to right click and learn the CC. And at this point, I want to take my range to this particular. So we'll say we're going to learn the CC. So we're going to say our controller type here. So we'll say this is going to be controller 16. We'll set. And I'm just going to set this up to do a quick MIDI control. So I want controller 16. Okay, so we'll right click and say learn CC. And I'm going to move controller 16. And then we could have that kind of automatically kind of open up the filter for that particular instrument. Now let's say if I want to assign it to a particular like an instrument or a plugin that has no MIDI learn capability. So this is where we could just come, and we need to create kind of a loop back. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to create a loop back, and on the Mac OS we could use IAC drivers or loopback on, which is a Windows utility. We're going to go to our generic remote. So we'll go to our studio setup, and we want to set up a generic remote. And here we want to use, I'm going to enable my MIDI ports here. I just have these disabled. You generally don't have to do this. but we have our IAC bus, so I'm going to activate that. We'll go to our studio setup again. Let's go to so we're going to go to our generic remote, and we're going to set this to be our loopback driver. And at this point, I'm going to create kind of a dummy track here. And while this plays, we'll go to I'm going to load up kind of this track, and we're going to say this is going out, this MIDI track is going out to your loopback. And then on the MIDI send, or the MIDI insert, we'll go to our LFO plugin, and we'll say we want this to transmit CC10. So we go to our setup at this point. We'll just say, okay, I want to click on Learn. So this CC10 is going to automatically be transmitting. So as I hit play, just enable it here from my controller. So I click on Learn. That's now captured that MIDI message. And what we want to do is to say we want this to not do transport, but we want to go to this particular track. We want to go to that device, and we want it to go to let's see, this I haven't done this in a while here. Okay, let's go to Mixer. All right, and then we'll say let's go to our inserts, to our dual filter, and now at this point I want the position to automatically be set up from this LFO. So as we play, alright, let me just, I haven't done this in a while. I know it's a little tricky and a bit convoluted, but we'll come over to, again, our studio setup. Alright, I'm just going to click on Learn one more time here as we play. All right, so say I wanted to go through my positions. I wanted that to automate. So again, go to Studio. So basically we're setting up the loop back so that when that all plays, we'll adjust the position. Alright, so what we want to do is to just kind of change this to so once you have that kind of routing, you can see that that's now changing. And let me see if I get this going with kind of the full file so you can hear it. So again, make sure that this particular channel is going out to the IAC. So we have this going out to Groove Agent. Let's go to Again, studio setup, and we'll make sure that so you see that it's now kind of changing. And you could adjust how the LFO, let's just kind of make it like half notes. So you could just kind of have the LFO kind of change. I know it's a little convoluted, but basically send it to a loop back. Set your loop back in the generic remote setup. You could do the learn function here, and that will then drive the particular LFO for the plugin. And there's a video I did on this that kind of walks through the whole process as well that you could refer to, and that'll work with any particular plugin parameter. Sorry, it's a little convoluted, but you can get it to work. All right, my Chatfield jumped, so. All right, so a question. If I route my voices to a group and I route the effects channels to the same voice channel, I mean, instead of having the effects to stereo out, they go to the Vox channel. So if I put EQ in a Vox channel, do I EQ the sends going to this channel too? All right, so let's say we'll just set up a scenario here. I have a project we could probably use for this. Okay, so let's say I have a number of background vocals in this project here. So let's say, just to give you some context on it.
World was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make you feel good?
All right, so let's say I want to take these particular tracks and send them to a group. Okay, so now we're going to add a group channel to the selected tracks. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to look at the mixer because we may already have reverb on those particular voices. All right, so let's say if we're here, all right, so I'm just going to all right, so we had these kind of grouped already. Let me just make sure that these are all dry. Okay, so now when we solo the folder here,
Don't it make you feel good? Feel good. Knowing that somebody loves you.
okay, and it says you want to route the effects channels to the same voice. Okay, if I route my voices to group and I route the effects channel to the same voice channel, so I'll add my, so I'll come here and let's add these to my, I'm going to add an effects channel. So we'll just call this our, say, Revelation. Okay, so now we could have, so we have our Revelation set going out of for all these tracks. So we'll listen to this. I'm going to activate my quick link so that we could adjust one.
Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody wants to.
All right, and let's go ahead and send this reverb to our group 2. So now when we listen to it, everything is...
Feel good. Feel good. Knowing that somebody loves you. Don't it make
All right. So it says, instead of having an effects to stereo out, they go to the Vox channel, I guess, or group. So if I put EQ on the Vox channel, do I EQ the sends going to the channel 2? So you don't have to EQ the sends. You could, at this point, choose to.
feel good?
So if I'm on the effects return channel, I could make the reverb brighter.
Somebody wants to give you their heart.
So if I wanted to make the reverb really bright and just kind of cut that off.
Somebody just the way you do. Don't it make you feel good? Feel good. Knowing that somebody wants to.
So you don't need to EQ the sends necessarily. You could EQ the return channel, or you could, of the effect, or you could EQ, the overall, the entire group as a collective entity, but you don't, you can EQ these independently, each individual source feeding it, but, you don't have to. You could EQ it, all of the vocals in the group track. So let's say as we listen to this and we go to our group,
Make you feel good. Feel good. Knowing that somebody
so that's globally for the effects and for the reverb and the tracks if you wanted to. So, but I don't, you can edit each source. You could edit EQ. You could EQ each source. You could EQ the reverb. You could EQ the group, or any combination of. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so it's Thomas. Just say, hi, Greg. Thanks for your priceless masterclasses. All right. All right, and Thomas's question is, I'm writing an orchestral piece and want to have the violas audio panned from left to right and from back to front in certain movements. I'll be printing the audio in stereo and another version in quad. What do you recommend I do to accomplish this sonically? Okay, so if we're doing I'll just do this with a, and you may not hear this because I'm just transmitting stereo. But let's say if I want to take just a quick string piece, I'll take a cello, for example. Some different sample instruments, may have fixed positioning for the instruments so that it is, it strongly mimics a typical orchestral, environment. But let's say I take this, we could obviously just pan. So if I wanted to pan left to right, I could just come right over here and we'll we'll record the automation. All right, so now we play that back. I'll let go. We will see that the panning is automatically following, and we can just automate like that. Now, if we wanted to do this for a quadraphonic output, we would need to go to your audio connections and set an output for quadraphonic or 5/1. So let's just say we want to do, I'll just choose 5/1 here, but we could choose, if you wanted to be more quadraphonic here. We have left, right, left, surround, right, surround. So we would set these to your outputs on your audio interface. And now that we have this track routed to the audio, let's say now that it is routed out not to the stereo but to our quadraphonic output, all we would have to do at this point is we could go left to right and then go to the rear. We don't have rear where we're hearing it, but you could just automate in the same manner and automate left to right. So everything we just did, play back, is automated in the same manner. So that's how you would do it in surround sound, 5.1, or quadraphonic if you wanted to. You may have the violist upset that they have to walk from left to right on the stage and from the front to the back and, you know, hit all the other musicians. The winds and brass won't be happy, but that's how you could do it. And then once you, and see, just kind of follow-up question, another part of the question, I'll be printing the audio to stereo in another version quad. What do you recommend? So all you'd have to do is say, when you go for your export audio mix down, that you say, okay, I want this to be my stereo output. And we'll say, okay, let's add this to the queue. And now I want it to create my quad output mix and add it to the queue, and just simply start queue export. That would output the stereo file and then output the quadraphonic file right after. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay. So we see question. I'm wondering if it's possible to add channels like effects, audio, instrument channels by using the Project Logical Editor. So, you know, usually the Logical Editor kind of can affect you know, it's not necessarily like for generating data, but for taking existing data. But, you know, if you hit, you know, there's keyboard shortcuts already. If you go to project and add track, so if you say, okay, I just want, you know, an instrument track, I want an instrument track, you know. So you want to add, so it's not necessarily done by, you know, by selecting, you know, in the Project Logical Editor. So you could just simply, you know, add track, you know, and there's keyboard shortcuts for all of these. So let's just say you wanted to go to your key commands, and we'll come over here and say, you know, add audio. So if you go to project, it's probably going to be under the project menu, you'll see, you know, add, or just under add track, you can have keyboard shortcuts for that. So let me know if that's what you want to do, but you don't need the Project Logical Editor for that. You could just simply do that directly with keyboard shortcuts. All right, so we see from R&B, Justice, might have been asked before, now new here. Is there a way to stop Cubase from freezing when adding new plugins? So if it's like freezing, like if it's like the momentary, you know, I'm not sure if the program has stopped working, or like while you're adding plugins here. So let's say if I say I wanted to add an insert. So let's say I wanted to add a dynamics processor here, that you get that little momentary freeze while it's resetting for the delay compensation. So as it does that, so what some other programs do is they have the plug-in play out of time until it stops, and then it resets for the delay compensation. Whereas if that's the case, what Cubase is doing is this is automatically doing the delay compensation as the plugin is added, and you may hear a little bit of a gap. So, but let me know if that's the freeze that you're referring to. Okay, so you see from Quellen, who asks question, for which purpose do you recommend using direct routing with multiple channel routing? Isn't this something which you can do with normal send channels? Sometimes you can use the normal send channels, but you may want to use your send channels for effect sends in a big mix. Now, if you're doing some different areas, so I often will have people set up like direct routing for if they're using a system, let's say a headphone and a hardware headphone monitoring system, and they want the audio to always be able to go out and feed the input sources, and I'm thinking of something maybe like a hearback system where the users then have like a little controller and they could set the different levels of different tracks. So that's a good use of the direct monitoring. So if we're doing like 8 headphone mixes, we could go to our racks and we'll activate our direct routing. So now I could send this to 8 different groups, and those groups can be routed to my 8 stereo outputs on my hearback system. And that way I'm using my direct routing for sending the audio to multiple destinations, and I still have all of my effect sends available. So when you need to, have more complex routing where you don't necessarily need to have various, like the levels between the wet and dry, but I need it to go to this destination and this destination and this destination. Let's say if you had everything, like you're recording a live show and you wanted to print it to print a stereo mix to 3 different sources while you're recording a live concert. So you could set up the direct routing for stuff like that, and and again, not use while you can send to the groups using effect sends, you may not if you have 8 stereo sends going out to your headphone monitoring system, then you may not have any effect sends left for using effects like reverb and chorusing and delay that people want to use. So that's when it makes sense to have a different path, and when the direct routing can make a lot of sense, and for printing different mixes and stuff pretty easily. All right, so we see Ralph just asks, is the in-place editor available only in Pro? I can't get it to work in Essential 12, so let me. I'm not sure if it's in Elements 12, but I'll go ahead and take a quick look. May not be in Elements version, but we'll take a quick look just to confirm. it a second here. All right, we'll give it a shot here. I'll just make. All right, so let's. Look at the track controls. Yeah, so it doesn't look like the in-place editor is in Elements. So it's probably going to be an Artist and Pro. Sorry about that. All right, so we see hi from Turkey again. How can we delete the parts of a sample in the sample editor if that's possible? All right, so let me just jump back. So I think most of the time when you're deleting different parts, you may want to actually just do it on the project window. But if we come, let me just switch projects. All right. All right, so let's say I just want to take that part away. So I'm just hitting the delete key. So just select it kind of with the range. And then as you do that, we'll see that this goes away. I'm just going to hit the backspace or delete key, and then that will just get rid of that portion within the sample editor. So give that a shot. Let me know how it works. All right, always wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Glad you can make it today. All right, so JB asks, is it possible to use Groove Agent 5 without the dongle? So yeah, Groove Agent 5 was updated almost about a year ago to use without the dongle. So you could transition it to the Steinberg, the Steinberg licensing model. So you may have a voucher for it, but I think you may need to download like the latest version for it to work. But yes, you can use Groove Agent 5 without the dongle, Groove Agent 5 and Groove Agent SE5 without the dongle. All right, so we have Xyloom just waving hi to everyone. All right, so we see question, is it true that recording at 44.1 makes your DAW work harder than at 48K? I don't think so. It's actually, playing less samples negligibly. Not a big difference, but it is playing fewer samples per second. So, but I don't think you'll notice any quantitative difference, any difference that's noticeable or apparent. All right, so we see Miguel Cuadrado just says hello, friends, and he's just finished a project using Cubase 12. So congratulations. It's always wonderful to finish a project. We had that discussion a couple weeks ago about how to actually, get your projects done. It's a great, so congratulations. It's a big deal finishing a project. All right, so we see Chris Lyons just says en español. So no, my high school Spanish would be an insult to anyone speaking Spanish. We do these in English, but if you want to type in your question, we do have it. It will automatically be transcribed in the closed captioning of the particular in the live stream. So, but you could transcribe it and copy text. So if you have a translation service like Google Translate and you have a question, please feel free to do translation there. We have people do it all the time. I'm sorry, I'm the ignorant American that primarily speaks one language. All right, so we have a question from Davidi. How to return to start of playback after stop. So currently it's going to be a preference. So if we come over here, I'll activate this particular project. All right, so there's kind of two different modes for the transport. So one is for it to stop right where you leave off, and that's using the space bar. Now, if you want the space bar to return to the start position, go to Preferences, and then go to Transport, and then you'll see Return to Start Position on Stop. And I'll hit Apply and hit OK. So now, as I hit the space bar, it'll go right back to that particular spot that we started from. Now, if you have a numeric keypad, like I do on my keyboard, I could hit the Enter key to play, and then if I hit 0 once, it'll stop. And depending on this preference setting, so if I have this turned off, so if I hit play by hitting the Enter key, and I hit 0 once, it stops in place. I hit it twice, it goes back to the original spot. So consider maybe if you want to work kind of both ways at times, using the numeric keypad. So plays Enter, stop, hit 0 once, it stops at its current position, hit it again, it goes back to its previous position. All right, so we have the artist known as Love, who's able to join us today. So it's wonderful to see you again. Always great to see Michael Pierce. Wishing everyone that everyone is safe and well. He's listening on his phone while his his computer finishes a 45-minute bounce. Wonderful to see you on the live stream on Friday, Michael. Always great, and thanks for your book recommendation. I ordered it. All right, we have Maestro Musician also saying hello. Thanks for being on. So we see Miguel Cuadrado says, thank you, Steinberg, for finally adding sidechain support in Cubase elements. So yeah, it's always nice when some of the more professional features get rolled down. Okay, so we have Maestro Musician says, what's the best way to morph a sound with a stock Cubase instrument? I want to start with one sound and then morph into another sound of choice. Can this be done with Hallian 6? I think you can do it with Hallian 6. I'm pretty sure that you could probably do this with, I don't know how to do it. And if you watch like a Gary Gibbons tutorial video on Pad Shop, I'm pretty sure that Pad Shop could do it. So let's see. All right, so let's say if we have, sorry about that, let me just turn the volume down to reasonable. All right. But let's say, you know, I could, I think that we could probably just do this in patch up, but let's show you if you had the full version of Hallion, and I have Hallion 7, so I haven't done this in Hallion 7, but I think that you could probably morph between different instruments here. But let's take a look at how to do it quickly inside of Hallion. All right, so I'm just going to take all right, so we have this sound. All right, so we can play this particular sound here. Now we'll come over to our sample. All right, and then let's get to our sample mapping. All right, so if we wanted this to take a different sound, so now as we would play a particular, so we have two different sounds here. So as I would play back maybe between the two different velocities that you could just kind of layer those together. Let me just have these not overlap for now. So, but we could just, as you would switch, you could have this. All right, so let's set the two layers here. All right, so we play now. Okay, so I want, I'm going to set the root key here to like C1. So now if we wanted to just kind of take this and, oh, sorry, just added it to the wrong. Just come here, let's just put it. So here you could hear the two instruments kind of layering over top of each other and morphing between. So just a horrible example, but you could just kind of drag in the two samples and have different velocity levels here. So you have one instrument sound here. And then layered. So in the middle, they could overlap and layer and just have different sounds. So that's how you could kind of layer sounds using Hallian. Kind of a horrible example, but you think you'll get the idea of how to do it. All right, so Volker Schmoll asks what's going on here. So we're just answering questions that people have on their Steinberg products. So any questions you have, feel free to ask. All right, so we see a question from Daniel. Just says, hi, Greg. A key macro can be created to export the whole mix. Thanks. So we could create a macro to open up like the export audio mix down. But once here, it's not going to actually, so let's say, okay, we have the stereo selected. I don't think that this particular function will be addressable, so it may not execute the whole mix down, but you could use, if you go to your key commands, like sometimes the enter key, because it can be used in a myriad of different functions depending upon the context, but you could just go to, export audio mix down, so I think that's probably just macro, but if you just go to file to export audio mix down, you could call up that window, but it may not actually do the export as part of the macro. So and you could do perhaps a select all, go to render in place and apply the render in place settings to mix everything down, and you might be able to do that in the macro if you had the particular render in place options pre-configured. See, Neil Conway just says, Greg, this is totally helpful. Glad it helped. All right, and we see Soren from Sweden, and Neil Conway is checking in from Oregon in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Thanks for being on. All right, great to see Peter on. I just see him say, I meant it through me for a loop. Maybe I missed his first comment, but we're glad you can make it, Peter. All right, so Peter asks, is there an existing Project Logical Editor preset that will hide all muted tracks? Let's take a look. So let's get to our Project Logical Editor. All right, so it doesn't look like there's a preset, but if you wanted to create one, I'll save it to you. And if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to send this preset to you, Peter, to clubcubase@steinberg.com. .de. So to do it, we're going to transform, and we'll just start here. We'll say we want to transform, and we want to say we'll take our container type is a track, and the property is set to is muted, or we could actually even select here and make sure I have this condition set up correctly. Okay, so, and at this point we will choose under channel and track visibility, there's an agent for hide selected channels tracks. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save this. Okay, so I have just about every track muted here. So now we'll apply, and let's say okay, I'm saying it is set to is muted. So I'll just unmute some of these tracks here. So again, just say select, container type is equal to track, property is set to is muted, and then in the post process commands, channel and track visibility hide selected. Okay, so, and Peter, if you want to email me, I'm happy to share that particular preset, and you could just go directly to the user presets location and drop it right into there. So that's how you could hide all muted tracks. So it doesn't look like there's one existing, but you could do it in probably just a minute. All right, so we have Bert Flanders who's just saying hello. So welcome to the live stream. So we see from R&B Justice says, I figured I was just compensation, thank you. Anyway, to disable it by chance, otherwise it's not much of an issue. So currently there isn't a way to turn it off and on. So so it's just kind of how it is for it to play back in time. So. All right, so we have 315 Christians checking in from Beaumont, Texas. Thanks for joining us today. So you see, Greg, could I send you a Cubase project to use for examples? Certainly. Yeah, so you could just share a project via WeTransfer or some service, Dropbox, something like that, and be happy to use the project. If anyone else wants to donate projects of something that isn't going to get me a copyright flag on YouTube, I'd be happy to use anyone's projects that want to send them to me. That's good for demonstration purposes. All right, so wonderful to see Uno Memento checking in from Finland, wishing everyone in the United States a happy Independence Day tomorrow. So thank you very much. Looking forward to having a day off. And I appreciate everyone being willing to do the live stream a day early to accommodate the holiday in the U.S. All right, when Chatfield jumped. Okay, so we see Best Korean Jesus on. So glad to see you on the live stream. It says you'll send a question via email. He has an strange issue. So yeah, just again send it to Club Cubase at Steinberg.de. All right, so we see Thomas R asks, hey Greg, how would you create a print track for my mix? Send everything to one channel and then record, or would there be another better way? I'm coming from Pro Tools and would use an aux track. So I think, probably the easiest way to do it is just to create kind of a bus. So I want to, let's just go to different projects, show this. Okay, so I'm going to select all of my tracks here and this right click, and I'm going to add a group channel to the selected tracks. Okay, and we'll call this a print bus. Okay, so now all of my tracks, and this is another good example of where, like, let's say we have a print bus here, and we had a question about using the direct routing. So I could now just come over here and say, let's just create an audio track, and I want its input to come from our print bus. So we'll say, here's our print bus. Okay, now if you don't want to necessarily affect the routing of this, so let's say this is all now going to the print bus. If we go, sorry about that, I hate when macOS does that. But I'm going to go to my racks and we'll make sure that direct routing is on. I could select all of my tracks here. So we'll say I want to take all of my we'll take all those source tracks here. And now I could send this to my print bus, and as we play, I could still send everything here through my stereo out. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. And now all of my tracks are going to my stereo out. So let's go to, let's say, our large mixer. And I want to send this to my print bus. And I'll do this to all the tracks at once. Sorry, let me just get this set up. So now I'll hold down Alt Shift and we can say, let's just use kind of our print bus. So now everything here is going into my print bus. And I could just leave that without affecting the routing. And all you would have to do is add a stereo audio track. And we want its input from the print bus. And now I can just come right over here. And let's record. So none of my routing was affected. So I could just, send it right out to a group and capture here. Or while you do an export audio mix down, have it, kind of gets you to the same finish line. If you do your export audio mix down and just choose to create a new audio track, you could include everything. But if you want to do, like, if you're working with external processing, you could just simply have everything go through a print bus. So you could just create that group. If you didn't want to affect the routings of everything that's set up here, like, instead of, you want this still to go out of your stereo out, send everything directly to the print bus and go into kind of the mixer, go to the racks, and you can activate direct routing if you wanted to, and send everything to the print bus. And this is kind of just an alternative busing, and then you could have just an audio track, set up as the capture from the print bus if you wanted to. All right, so we see Spike Williams checking in from Rhondda, Wales. He says, clearly someone hasn't been paying attention. I was referring to himself. Yeah, we're doing it today just because of Independence Day in the United States tomorrow. All right, so I just saw a project from Tiago, an acapella. Thanks for sending that. I know you had some issues, I think, with doing the audio alignment with it, so it'd be great to have. So I just see from Maestro musician Gary Gibbons, with a question mark. So yeah, Gary does like amazing tutorials and sound design sets for Pad Shop, and you probably knows Pad Shop better than anyone. So if you want to learn about every little nook and cranny of Pad Shop, watch his tutorial videos as well. So really wonderful sound designer, makes incredible sounds for Online Music Foundry. Check him out. All right, Lars asks, how can I color groups of tracks with a certain color, also group channels in the same color? Thank you. Okay, so if we wanted to, so a lot of times what throws people off is what is actively selected. So if we have no events selected and I wanted to come over and take all of these tracks and colorize them at once, I could just go to the little color palette here, and then we could colorize all of the tracks like so. So that's how you can do it. Now, where a lot of people get thrown off is when doing that, if they have one event selected and they select all these tracks and they want to colorize a number of tracks at once, they could just come here and they'll say, okay, let's colorize, and it doesn't seem to be working, but what's happening is that one selected event is changing colors. So make sure that you have no event selected and only at the track hierarchical level, and then you could just change the colors freely like that. And if you have a group channel selected, that would also, so let's say if I send all these tracks to a group, so now if I have all of those selected, so my group track and the audio track would all change simultaneously, as we can see. So let me know if that's what you wanted to see. All right, wonderful to see David M. on from Liverpool. It was wonderful hearing your stories about Liverpool and the Cavern Club on the live stream. All right, so we have Greg. How do you clean up stem sounds after separating the stems, trying to remove bleed from other instruments in each stem? So let's say if we are, I haven't tried this out. I'll see if I get a tutorial on it. But let's say, like here in this kick drum, we hear the snare. Bleeding through. So it's a kick mic, but with live drums, it's kind of inevitable that you're going to get toms and hi-hat. So there is a function in Spectral Layers where you could say, I want to take this, and I could show it on Friday's live stream and have it prepared. But that you could do and I haven't tried it in 10 yet, but there's a kind of a debleeding process. All right. And let's say, all right, so I want to take this snare and let's run Spectral Layers on it. Okay, so I want to take my kick and let's come over, and I just want to select the snare. All right, so if and we'll hit apply. Okay, so now so I think you could set it up to do kind of, debleeding like that through Spectral Layers. But I'll see if I could have it kind of a presentation on it for Friday's live stream. But I think you're able to do stuff like that. So, all right. So wonderful to see Cedric Desa on from India. Glad you can make it. Missed having you on. Everyone's happy that Michael Teams is on from Weatherford, Texas. Because he'll distribute ice cream. All right, so I see from Michael from Coast Mastering saying skipped question on purpose. So I'm not sure if I saw a question. I'll cycle back. So no. Sometimes the question is, sometimes they don't come through all the time. I'm just going back for the last to about 1 hour in. So sometimes questions don't appear. It could be maybe there's too many characters, but if you want to ask your question again, Michael, we could see if we could get to it. And maybe if someone else sees Michael's question in the chat, if they could repost it. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A. Hi, Greg, happy to be on live. Why can't I move tracks in mix windows and how to color tracks in the mixer window? So I think a lot of times, a lot of people are kind of using this mixer window, and if this is the window that you're using, that you could just simply, reorder the window, the order here, and it will take into account, the order. So there isn't a way currently to kind of drag mixer channels, from one area to another within the mixer. And if you want to color within the mixer, just click. And the next question is how to color within the mixer. So if you wanted to just take a particular channel and add a color, just click just to the right of the name, and then you could set the channel colors. So just to the right of the name, when you hover over, you'll see like a little triangle appear on the right hand side, and then you could colorize right there. See, Manuel is happy that there's finally be some ice cream. All right, we have Robotic checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. Peter's wishing a happy 4th of July from Montreal to all his American friends. Wants everyone to play safe. So yeah, we want everyone to have all their fingers tomorrow at the end of the day. Okay, so you see, actually, Greg, I meant if the events were muted and not the track itself. My bad. Sorry about that. So if you want, so I'm not sure if you want the events hidden or if you want the events like erased. And there is a preference. I haven't played around with this under editing. Of treat muted events like deleted so that it doesn't continue to play back. But let's say if I have this event muted here. So let's see if we go to our project logical editor. So, we could, so there isn't necessarily a hiding of events, but you could erase the particular events. But let's see if we could set up something. Maybe we could set up a logical, maybe do like a track version. Okay, so let's select so let's say an event, and let's say the media type is, or property, set to is muted. All right, so this will I'm just going to set up conditions so we can test it. Okay, so let's see if maybe instead of, so, we could select, we could take deleted events or muted events and delete them. So let's show that. So we go to our project logical editor, and let's see, we'll look for under different parts and events. Okay, so if we say, okay, we want to delete muted events, so we could come over here and just delete the muted events if you wanted that, Peter. Now let's see if I wanted to select and let's try to copy. Let's go to track versions. say new version, and let's see if we do a paste at origin. All right, so we'll see if this kind of works. So this way, if I wanted to, instead of deleting, if I wanted to put those into a new track version, all right, so let me, instead of copy, I'm going to do cut. Then we'll come over here to track versions and we'll say previous version at the end. All right, so so we could delete the muted versions by doing that previous logical project logical editor. So what this will do, if I did it right, is maybe take the muted ones and put those into a different track version. So we'll come here, hit apply, see if this works. All right, let me just try this one command. I think we're close to this. If this is kind of what you want, if you still want to have access to them. All right, let me see what happens if we just take this. Okay, so we have this set up. We'll go to the project logical editor. All right, and I'll choose the previous version again here. Okay, so if we run this, we will just so I'll play around with it some more, Peter, but let me know if that's kind of, if you need the event still accessible on that. But I could play around with that if you want to give me a little more information on that. All right, Michael Teens is on, making up for his tardiness by giving out ice cream to everyone. Right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button and Jazzy, just reminding everyone the next live stream will be on Friday. All right, so we see from Taylor from Music for World Peace Records, it's impossible to share logical editor presets without having to share profiles. It'd be nice to have someone send me a preset and be able to add it into my own profile. So since version 12, let me just clear my throat. Since version 12, if you go to like your logical editor and project logical editor presets, so let me just select okay, so when you go to like your logical editor presets, and it's the same with so when you get to your setup and you go to the preset category, you can say show user preset location, and then it will just open up your Finder or Windows Explorer, and you're able to at that point just drop them right into this particular folder. So you can see earlier presets. These are all presets that I've made for Logical Editor, and then you'll also see Project Logical Editor here as well. So you could just drop them in, and you don't have to worry about creating a profile, and but that just opens the folder directly, so you could just drop them right in. See that Peter had a nice Canada Day, and it's good that fireworks were prohibited because of forest fires. So. All right, Sable Winters hopes that everyone is doing well today. All right, we see Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of red, white, and blue ice cream. So, and he says, thanks, strawberry, vanilla, and blue coconut. Sounds great. Thank you. Very generous, Michael. All right, so we see, Greg, can you tell me how to make a stem from one vocal track? So, if you want to make stems of like an individual track, like let's say I'll just load up a quick project with some vocals in it. Okay, so let's say I want to take all of my background vocals here. Okay, so we're going to have, let's say, our lead vocal and a number of background vocals here. So let's just make sure not everything is soloed. So if you want to, if they're not sent to groups, you could just, as we do this, if they're not sent to groups, I'll just say, okay, we're going to take like this whole area, and I'll just put my left and right locators around it. And then we can say export audio mixdown. And then we can say, okay, I want to take just the stereo out of the soloed tracks, and I'll call this like a vocal stem. And we're going to just import this into, we're going to create an audio track. All right, and now all of our vocals will be kind of printed at the bottom if everything is being sent. And when you do this, make sure you don't have. Now, if this is also going to our vocal groups, so I think we have group 2 for all of our vocals. Okay, so I will just, now if everything is going into one group, when we do an export audio mix down, we could just say, I only want to export group 2. So if you have stuff kind of set up for in different groups, a lot of people will set up different groups for creating stems, then this will be all of the vocals for the particular project. Sorry about that. I'll just come here.
Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody loves you.
So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, if you want how to make a single stem for all your vocals. All right, so you see from Robotic, how to build a script for MIDI devices. Is it possible to download somewhere? So I'm not sure if it's like a MIDI patch script. If it's a MIDI patch script, you can go to, let's say we go to your studio setup, or you see, we'll go to, let's go to your studio menu. And under more options, you'll see MIDI device manager. And here you could say install device. And if you need to define a new device, we can say, okay, let's call this robotic synth. All right, and it's going to be, I'm going to use all 16 MIDI channels of this particular device. All right, and now we're going to come to our robotic. We're going to open the device, and now we could just kind of start typing in patch banks. So once we come over here, we could enable edit, and we'll create a bank, and then you could just start kind of typing in. Okay, I want it to be this bank message. Okay, so we'll come here. And then you could start typing in bank messages and patch names there. If it is for a MIDI device manager, you can, or the MIDI remote, you can, there's a number of them that you could download from the Steinberg forums, but you could also at this point, you can see a lot of the different scripts can show up here, and then you could import scripts from different sources that are downloadable, but you could create your own pretty easily right there. And basically mapping out the hardware for, what the, mapping in software, the controls that mimic your particular hardware controller, and then you could assign those functions using the mapping assistant. So let me know which device it was that you were thinking of. All right. See, Best Green Jesus says, it's weird to adopt someone else's script. Like, that ain't yours. You're going to do the best to raise it, and it ain't yours. Laughing out loud. So, yeah, I think scripts could be, really personal for, how you work and what type of work. So a composer, maybe someone may have completely different scripting options than what's available on someone who's just doing EDM music or someone that's recording bands, stuff like that. So, all right, so we have Ralph Nelson Tucker wishing a happy Independence Day to the Americans from the UK. All right. All right, so we see Patrick ask Greg, should I use the multiband envelope shaper, multiband compressor, multiband expander? What's the best way to use it? And if I really feel Cubase has great quality mixing, but do I need Pro Tool? So I think, if your mix doesn't sound good, it's not going to be the program's fault. So I think, Cubase has a wonderful sounding audio engine that, takes a lot of problems away that you may run into with other programs. So there's, obviously a number of incredible film soundtracks and, great work that people have done doing everything in Cubase. Now, when you want to use different multiband tools, so let's just explore them. So, these are using kind of great plugins that you would often use for fixing scenarios, but just, instead of having just one compressor, you could have different compressor settings for different frequency ranges, which is really helpful. So let's say as we're playing, I want to just put on a multiband compressor. So just go through. So this way we could have kind of, if you want more, adjust the attack on. So different, or different. So this would allow us to have, each, if I only want to, compress these particular frequencies. Or if you wanted to go to like the multiband envelope shaper, so we could say, okay, on kick, I wanted to have, like I have the full mix here, but I wanted to just take the low end frequencies and add more attack. Let's say I want more snap, and I want to change this frequency range. So you could do that in a full mix or just like individual drums, and this could be really helpful. Like, okay, I have just a stereo drum loop, and I wanted the snare to tame it, but I don't want to have that envelope shaper apply to my hi-hat cymbals and my kick. That's a great tool for that. And then also, if you want to get into, so these are all wonderful tools that, often people spend a lot of money doing. And if you wanted to just be able to expand, so this way you could just have, expansion in different frequency ranges as needed. So if you get a mix that's really bass heavy or has too much top end or is all mid range, you could just, and I just used like the multiband compressor on someone's like a 2-track mix where their cymbals were just like, way too present and conflicting with a lot of other stuff. So I just found a frequency range of just the cymbals that were kind of annoying and was able to compress that. So lots of great uses. So a lot of people tend to use them on, the master bus, but they could be used on, but they could be used, freely anywhere. Okay, so we see what's the use of Squasher and Imager in Cubase. I saw videos, but I really want to know where to use it. So, Imager will be a multi-band, a multi-band like widener, if you will. So we'll just come over here and let's say I'll just go to the Imager plugin. Okay, so a lot of times when we're doing a particular mix, you know, you may not want the low end. You know, people will do kind of like a stereo expander and it sounds okay in certain frequencies, but maybe not all frequencies. So let's say I want my low end to be I want that to have kind of very narrow width. And we'll take this frequency here. You can see how if we make it wide, it's going to often be kind of muddy in the mix. We'll listen to that in context. So we may want to just kind of drop that. So that's a lot of stuff that you probably would fight to get rid of, but you could also kind of focus the sound and say, I want the highs to be wider without the lows getting automatically too much. And you could, of course, adjust in solo the different frequency ranges. Now, where you'd use a squasher is, you know, definitely kind of used for a lot of dance and EDM productions. And that's going to be like a really fast kind of, you know, limiter. So we'll just come over here. And a lot of times these will be used maybe on a kick, maybe on, you know, different groups, or the, you know, it's often used in the fold in the like the 2-bus, like the stereo output. So, you know, if you want to get like real aggressive, you know, with particular tracks. So say, okay, let me put on. It's kind of an extreme example, but so it's kind of an up-down compressor, so, and again, multi-band. So let's turn on just the lows. So it's an up-down compressor, so this will often be used on, you know, you can use, people use it on kicks, you know, use it on lots of different sources, but often it's going to be used on kind of the master output. So, but, you know, experiment with them. All right, so we see Greg, a friend of mine, have become blind at an adult age. He wants to do music, and I recommended Cubase, but he says Cubase has problems. Might be very beginner. Can you say some ease to start for him? So, you know, we have a lot of, you know, different users that do all their work blind. You know, we do a lot of work with Stevie Wonder, and he's able to do all of his work blind. One of my mastering engineer friends who lives just a few miles away from me, you've heard me speak of him, Greg Lukens, you know, he's able to run Cubase and Nuendo blind, and he became blind after like a kind of a dirt bike, a little motorcycle accident when he was 14 years old. And, you know, he's probably faster on Cubase, Nuendo Wavelab than most people. So we have lots of blind people, and that's why we set up remote controllers and user configurable key commands. And we did the user configurable key commands initially because we figured that we would occasionally have like a special Stevie Wonder version of Cubase where it'd be like one function that he needed to work non-visually. And then we figured out that anything that worked better for a blind person, was also beneficial to people that could see as well, because you could just do it with keyboard shortcuts. And that's why we have user configurable keyboard shortcuts and a lot of functions that make, Cubase work really well for blind and visually impaired people. All right, so we have a soup recipe from Michael Pierce. It says different soup today. Boil new potatoes, well done, mix butter or equivalent and miso in a pan, and melt mix, cover potatoes in mixture and blister under grill. Season, serve with finely sliced scallions. Sounds good. I'll try to make that tonight. See, Ralph Nelson Tucker just got some 2 kilograms of locally grown potatoes from a neighbor, so he's going to use it for the soup recipe. Okay, so we see so from Uno Momento, says, sorry, Greg, I meant how to make voicings from one vocal track. All right, so if you have the chord track, so let's say you have one vocal track and you wanted to create harmonies. Maybe that's what you want to do. Let's see if I have this project still in my recent. We'll try this one here. I think I have chord track in here. Alright, so I have my chord track kind of laid out. Alright, so let's say we just want the phrase "and a day" to make a harmony from. So I'm going to grab the range selection tool and I'll turn my snap off. And we'll say I just want to select that particular tool. Now, since we have the chords here and it knows what it's looking for, we will come to our audio menu and say generate harmony voices. And we could do, I'll just do 2 harmony voices here. All right, and I'll just bring these both volume down here to make it in context.
And I'm left here for 1,000 years and a day.
Sorry, I may move that rhythmically. But just, so again, just kind of select just that particular part. Audio to generate harmony voices. So let me know if that's what you want to do. So again, just kind of select the events that you want with the range tool, and then it will just kind of come over here and generate harmony voices, and then you could adjust the volume and adjust the panning accordingly for different tracks. So let's make that left. We'll pan this right. Then that's all you have to do. So let me know if that's what you're kind of looking for, Uno. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the wonderful questions so far. All right, so we see, hi Greg, what's pro tips on buses, how to make uses of buses in creative ways? So you could do a couple of different things that, I mean, most of the stuff being able to kind of process the audio and be able to, take, different sources and maybe kind of blend them together. But let's say, like if I wanted to, we're in this project, so. Just try something that has more kind of audio on it. Try something like this. There's obviously like parallel processing. So say if I want to group these two guitars together, so I'm going to send this to group channel. So we'll call this guitars. All right, so we're going to have our guitar group here. And I'm going to add another guitar group. So, you could do parallel stuff, but you could also have, like if you wanted to do something, maybe like, to change the sound a little bit in the chorus or something. I'm going to add another group channel, and then you could apply kind of different processing to it. Or you could actually just come over here. Let's take this group and send it to another group. So we could say, okay, I wanted to do maybe just a different processing and EQ it on the, let's say while it's playing, we'll unsolo it here. All right, so now so let's say I want to take my, we'll go to my guitar group, and I could have like even a different sound here. So let's say our guitar double. So if you wanted to kind of even just blend a different source or an effect on it. All right, so now let's say if we're in our guitar double group. Maybe I want to add an effect send on this. And let's make it like a reverence. And I want the delay to be reversed. So like going into the chorus, say while everything is playing. Now if we solo this, so let's say we go to our guitar group, we could have this. So, all sorts of different parallel type processing. All right, so say while we're listening to this, I'm going to go to my guitar group. Then if you wanted to blend in the brighter sound, you could do stuff like that as well, just kind of blending in kind of different flavors of different parts of, during the song with, think of different groups as being different flavors of effects and stuff like that, and then you could automate those changes. So, but lots of parallel stuff as well is pretty typical. All right, reading through comments. All right, wonderful to see Bruce Bruton checking in from Simi Valley. It was great to see you on the Zoom meetup. All right, my son just walked in. Just got remote control playing yesterday. He's very happy. Wants to go fly it as soon as I'm done with the live stream, I'm sure. All right, so we see from Uno Memento. Thanks, Greg. That was it. So glad got it figured out. All right, so a question from Greg Norman. Hi, Greg. Do you have any tips on how to make the media bay load faster? So, one of the things that to be aware of is, could be that, there are different. There's a preference that may, that may affect it. So when you go to preferences to media bay, there's one thing that says, scan folders only when media bay is open. So, what I do, like when I get a new library, just let media bay kind of scan it in the background so it does all of its indexing. Some people have this preference turned on, and then as they go to that particular preference, every time they load up media bay, it starts scanning through everything. And at times, media bay may never get a full scan of the system. And then it's just kind of continuing to do a scan over and over and over again. So make sure, again, if you go to preferences to media bay, that you have this set up, and also make sure that you have the limit here. I think you go up to 100,000 different presets or sounds if you're kind of at that edge. But generally it's I find it to be pretty fast overall. And you can say, okay, I just want to find all media types, and we'll just come over here. So if I open and close it, that seems pretty fast for all my VST sound or just on this computer. So it's not continuing to scan. And if particular folders that you don't have any Cubase relevant media, just go into the little directory and choose those folders, and don't have Media Bay scan in particular folders where there's, you know, like maybe you have photographs of your family. Media Bay probably doesn't need to access that, so you could turn off Media Bay searching in that particular folder. See, everyone's liking Michael's ice creams selections. See, Sable Winters is asking about a Aventone CV12 mic. All right, so we see from Best Korean Jesus, could you go into details about the new plugin replacement process of the VST SDK 3.7.8 included in the last update? I don't know, I haven't read up on that new particular feature. My guess, if I was to speculate, would be that as plugins are updated, so let's say, you know, you have a plugin named, you know, Stereo Reverb from, you know, company X, and sometimes that plugin will be Stereo Reverb 2, Stereo Reverb 3, you know, or this instrument 4, 5, 6, 7. So sometimes instruments that are labeled, I think Contact may have run into this, or if it was like a Contact 5 instrument that you saved and now you had Contact 6, that it may not have loaded up because the name was tied to Contact 5, and developers could have the option of having it automatically open up the latest version of a plugin to be used, but not all developers would take care of that. So I think it might be related to that. I could find out if you want to check with me on Friday. I could do some more research on it. All right, so I think we're at the end of questions so far at the stream. I know we had a bunch of questions that were sent in advance, so let's get to those. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. And again, if you need to send questions in advance, or if you want to share projects like some people have, you know, please send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. So let me just open up my Word document here. All right, so we see how to tell the difference between two similar audio files. So this was part of a discussion that we had on the Zoom meetup on Friday. So let's go ahead and do this in WaveLab. And we had a discussion of, like, you know, I think it was Marcos from Brazil was kind of like, okay, how to, you know, like I did mastering for a client and they said that they could do the same thing and it sounds the same to them. How can you kind of show the difference between different files? So let's come and let me just make sure I'm not going to. So let's say we have this file here. And we got into kind of discussion of like what's the difference between like an MP3 and kind of the original audio file and how to tell the differences. So I'm going to take this particular file and save it as an MP3. Okay, let me just get my file and we'll choose to export. And we'll do the whole file and we'll give it a name. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and render this particular file. Okay, so now we have what was the MP3 kind of re-encoded back. So we have kind of our original, and this was the MP3 file of it. So this was encoded, and then to open it back up for editing, it decoded it. And as we do this, we're going to lose some of the quality. So if we go to the analysis function in Wavelab and go to Analyze, and we'll see Audio File Comparator. So I'm going to take these two files to compare, and then we could actually have it generate a delta file. So we'll come over here, hit OK, and we see there are only 11 million differences between these two files. So now we have our original file. And now we could listen to the difference between the files. So this is what an MP3 encoding decoding process does to your file. So this is, hear how like the left and right channels may be slightly out of time. So it's a difference between the different files. So if you want to take two files and kind of compare the differences and say, hey, this is, you know, if you're like, if you exported two files, or like, what is the difference between them? You could just come right over here to the audio editor in Wavelab, choose Analyze, and go to the Audio File Comparator. All right, so we'll exit out Wavelab here. Okay, so we had a question mailed in. The question is, how to replace and save a groove agent kit after replaced a kick in a pattern? Please, Greg, show the complete process, i.e. from beginning with replacing a kick sound for a pattern to save the kit. Okay, so let's come over. I'm just going to restore this, revert this project. Sorry about that. I think I may have hidden everything. Okay, so let's say if I have a particular pattern, so we'll open up this kit here. All right, so we have this pattern, so we'll just play this. All right, now let's say I wanted to replace the kick sound that's being used. So this particular kick. All right, so to do this, I could just come over here. We could go to either from within Media Bay or within our different sounds. So we'll say, okay, I want to find kick drums. So I could replace sound like this just by having the pad selected. All right, now if it's going to be our own kit, now sometimes if we wanted to come over here and export this particular agent, we would say right click on the agent and we could export the kit with the samples. And if we kind of just click at the top here, we just cancel that. So as soon as we go to the browse containing folder, here we could just say, okay, I want to go to my desktop, and we could now create a new folder, and we'll call this custom kit. And we could store the kit directly into that particular folder. Now, a lot of times what I would do is store it into the project folder so that you know every time you open up this project, you know exactly where the samples are. Now, one of the tricks gets to be is, you know, if you get a message saying, oh, we can't really save this, it could be because when you're exporting samples that are kind of like where they're the built-in content of Groove Agent, that it's not going to export to samples that are part of the factory kits. So it's not going to allow you to export all the samples from factory kits. So if we clear this particular agent, so I'll come here, I'll cut the kit, and let's say at this point I wanted to take a kick, and let's take just maybe like this particular sound. So I want to take this sound here, and I'll turn my snap off, and I want it to just isolate the kick. I'm going to come here and cut. Let me just select just that particular event here. Let me just. All right, so I'll just hit Command Shift X, and I'll just say Shift X. Sorry. So I'm going to create just its own kick here. So as we do this, I'm going to bounce selection. So we're going to create just a quick separate audio file. So we go to audio, bounce selection, replace. So now when I drag this in, so, and we play that pattern that was here, we should just hear maybe the kick. All right, and I'll take my loop off. So as we play, let's say this particular pattern. Okay, so now that I've created my own kit, this is when, again, right-click on the kit. So using my own samples I've designed, we'll export the kit with samples. We'll come up here, we'll say browse containing folder. I want it to go into documents, into projects, into Hangouts. All right, and we'll create a folder. We'll say July 3 drum kit. And I'll just, all right, and I want it to be in the category of kicks, whatever. So it's come over, say drums. I want it to be beat, whatever we want to call it. All right, we'll give it a name. All right. So now we'll export that kit with the samples. All right. So we'll call this July 3rd. Okay, so now when we come over, you know, we could now just simply load a kit. so let's come over to maybe our browser, and we'll say this computer, documents, to projects, to our Hangouts. Then I think we'll see a July 3rd folder, if I did everything right. Oh, here's our July 3rd folder. And then that's where all of our samples would be. So again, just when you come over here, so just right click on it. But if you're using a combination of factory samples and user samples, it's not going to back up the factory samples because they're already kind of part of the program. All right, so we have a question. I run into a new to me problem in Cubase 12 Pro recently, and I'm hoping you could find a solution. While mixing a project, Cubase crashed while I was loading a UAD X plugin. I immediately opened the project up to continue my work, and somehow the audio file sample rates permanently changed from the original sample rate, even though the project sample rate and interface sample rate remained the same. I've been troubleshooting it, and so far I've checked the project sample rate at 44.1 and made sure it matches my audio interface sample rate 44.1 and compared the audio to audio from other projects. It seems the audio sample rate was changed on the WAV files in the crashed project's audio folder, with no other audio from other projects was affected. This is the second project where I experienced this problem. Do you know anyone else has experienced a problem? And can you give me advice on what to do? My computer specs are 2022 M1 Mac, Ventura 13.2, Mac running Cubase Pro 12052, and using Apollo Dual Mark III. Okay, so it seems the audio sample rate has changed in WAV files and crash. So I've seen sometimes similar things where the and we see this often like with mixers, where the mixer may be set at 48K, and then as it's being recorded into Cubase via USB, Cubase is set to 44.1, and sometimes the files, if you change the sample rate, the pitch will kind of change accordingly, and then it's never quite playing the right pitch at the designated sample rate. So if it is for every single file, one of the things that you could do is, if you see that the files are the wrong sample rate here, I would choose to, if you're saying that the record file format, kind of the header is at 48K, and then your project is at 44.1, we'll show this quickly. Okay, let me just find a project. So let's say if we go to this project, and I wanted to switch this from 44.1 to 48, at this point, what we would do is just go to the project setup. And so if we just listen to this, just for get our basis of tonality. All right, so now if I want to change the sample rate to, in my project setup, by going to the project setup, shift plus the letter S, and we switch it to 48K. So if you see a disparity, like the sample rate is written as a 48K file and this is 44.1, you could do this. So we're going to convert. It'll ask you, do you want to keep the files in the pool directory? We'll keep them. Can't hurt. And then do you want to keep the audio events at the sample positions? choose no, and now the file will play back at the same pitch, but the sample rate is now set to 48K. If you have a lot of, now let's say it was actually set to 44, but let's say it's now, we revert back to our project and that it was at 44.1, but we think it's actually maybe a 48K file, but the header is at 44.1. When we do this, and I think that this is the case where we go to our project setup, again, we go to project setup, and we can see we switch it to 48 or switch it to 44.1, and we'll say we're going to convert, and then we're going to keep. And then you get this where he says, do you want to keep the audio position at their sample positions? Here, generally, if we're doing a straight sample rate conversion, we say no. But if it was kind of the wrong header, you could try choosing yes and see what happens. Now, one other thing happens. Sometimes if it's every file versus like one file, you could probably go into Wavelab if you have Wavelab and kind of just take the actual and switch kind of the metadata of the file, or the header of the file. I think you could do that and open it as a raw file. But one quick way of doing this is just to take, the files and, if we send it to a group, all right, so we're going to send it to a group. And then if it's kind of playing back the same pitch, but it's playing back the correct pitch, but it's then still acting, but you still have, like when you go to export it and then that track is out of time, just send it out to a group. So send that track out to a group, and then on this audio track, set the group as the input and just capture it as a new audio file at the correct sample rate. So there's all sorts of other things that you could do, but if it's playing back correctly, but it's still like maybe it's not exporting correctly, just have it play back and capture the audio output through a group, and then you'll have a new recording at the correct sample rate. So give that a try. That's from Kristen. All right, so here's a couple questions that came in that I saw online to answer for people's benefits. So question, it appears that in Nuendo, and this would be the same exact thing in Cubase, you can't change the color of the master meter, but in Cubase you evidently can. Is this actually the case? I'd like my control room meter to have hard color edges instead of the gradient. Okay, so once we have like our control room meters here, and we see we have meters here, and a lot of times they may be identical, and people will go into the preferences and go to meters and under metering appearance. So at this point we could choose, we'll see that this will be our plus 3 dB digital channel mixer. So if I change my meter colors here as we're playing, so let's say, okay, I want this to be like dark red at this point, or so we could, so we don't see a change here in this particular meter, but we see these changes in these meters now. So what you want to do if you want the master meter to change, you realize that there are like 10 or 11 different meter types here. And this is just one particular channel meter. So if we go to your preferences, I'm just going to restore my defaults. What you want to do is to make sure that this drop down, because we have different settings for digital, full scale, CATS 20, 14, 12, EBU, DIN, that this selection matches this selection that we see in the meters here. And then if we say, okay, here I want to go to digital scale, we could change kind of the master meter at particular points and say, okay, I want to bring this down, and at this point I want it to be violently, kind of violently more red here. So now I'll hit OK, and we'll see in the master meter that as we play, when this is set to digital, that will change and be independent of this meter. So each meter type can have their own dedicated coloring schemes. It's not global, so each one can be set independently. So I'll restore the defaults. All right, so we had a question. Is there a way to place a point in the track's automation lane right on the bar beat line? Snap on and off won't work for it. Quantize doesn't work on automation for tracks. Every time I program automation, I need to select every point and change its start point in the info line. All right, so let's make this, we'll open up a quick automation lane here. Okay, so let's say, we have some automation kind of dropped in. All right, so let's say I put in an automation point kind of close to the bar, but it's not exactly on the bar. And I want this to go on the bar, but let's set a value here. So I'm just going to move this. Okay, so, and what we want to do is just kind of move this value, this automation point, and snap it to the bar. So we're going to make sure that that snap is enabled. So as we snap it to the bar, we want it to preserve the same value. So we select the automation node, and let's say it's going to be -12. Okay, so we see -12. So a lot of times what people do is they move it, and then they could snap it, but they could inadvertently kind of change the value. So now I've snapped it to the bar, but as I do this, it's not set to the same value. I want the same exact value. All right, so one of the first tricks is if you want to add the automation node initially to the bar. So if think I'm close, I'm in the ballpark, all you have to do is hold down the mouse button, the left mouse button, like while you click to enter in the automation node. So if I'm here, if I want this to snap to the grid, just keep holding down the left mouse button. So I could place it just by clicking there anywhere. But if I click here, and let me just do it on a different point here, zoom in. So let's say if I want to place this automation point, if I hold down the left mouse button, we can have it automatically snap to the bar or beat, depending on the grid. So if I'm here, I just hold it down, it will then snap. But in this case, we don't want it to change the value as we move. So this one, I think we set to -12 dB. So I want this existing automation node to move, have it snap to the grid, but also not have it accidentally change values. So as I do this, I'm going to hold down the left mouse button, and let's say I could see what the value is here. So I'm changing the value, but now if I hold down Control or Command, that will automatically just kind of move the value to where it was and be snapped. So as we hold down, I move this over to the left or right, we can see that we've adjusted it to -24.1. I'm still holding the left mouse button down, and now as I click with the Control or Command key, that will just automatically snap it directly to the same value. So as I come here, snap, Control, and then it's going to just simply lock it right in to that particular value, just like that. So that way we could snap it in position, then hold down Control, and then release the left mouse button, and then we could restrict the movement so that the automation values don't have to be manually entered. Okay, some more questions. Open up a different project for this. Okay, so it's kind of 4 parts, kind of dealing with the score editor. I'll just revert this since I... Okay, so it says, I'm using the score editor to tab out a bass part for a player who doesn't read regular music score. And I'm wondering if there's a way to remove the musical notation entirely and just leave the tab in lyrics. Okay, so in this case, if we wanted to take a look at, let's say, our bass part in notation. So I'll come here, let's look at it in our score editor. So I'm going to just double click here. Let's go to our main, and I'll just set my clef. We'll put it on bass clef. Okay, so let's say we want to do tablature now. So I want to take this and turn it into tablature and not see the music. So I'm going to click on tablature mode, and I'm going to say we want this to be for bass, and we could set our so at this point we could say we have E, A, D, G is our strings. We could adjust the tuning, and we'll hit apply. So right now we see that we have the tablature and the music notation kind of showing the rhythm. We could also say I don't want to hide the stem, so if I want to see kind of the rhythmic tabs here, I want to see the rhythm displayed in the tablature as well as the notation. We'll say hide stems rest and hit apply. So now we could see our tablature. And to hide the notation, so this is showing the one part in tablature as well as in standard music notation, we would uncheck mirror staff. So once we do that, now we could just see the bass tablature all by itself. And if you have lyrics, that would automatically show up. Okay, and then there's a question. The tab auto-generates from the score, but can I manually edit the tab itself to play in different positions on the neck? So once we have our tablature in, and I'm just going to put this into just a quick page mode. All right, so we can see kind of what it's going to look like. And if I wanted to change the particular, I could select the note here, and then if we wanted to move it to different strings, I could just come right over here, right click on the note, and you could pick and choose. When you say move to string, you could just pick and choose exactly which string you want that to be notated on. So just right click, move to string, and then you could move it from your G, D, A, or E strings on the bass, or various strings on guitar. So again, just right click, move to string, and then you could move that around. All right, another question. Also, since this is the first time we've done this, am I able to create lead sheets for different instruments as part of the project and open them up and print them off at will if I need? So once we have like our bass part done, I could just come right over here and I could print out the bass part. If I wanted to print out, let's say, a piano part or a string part, I could just come over here and we could just choose the piano part. And let's say we want to do like a split staff. And let's go ahead and just kind of clean up some. So then each part, so instead of selecting all the parts in the score editor, just simply select the part that you want, whether it's the bass part, whether it's the piano part, and you could print each of these out independently. And if you have multiple parts selected, such as our piano and bass, and we open the score editor, we'll see the piano, and our bass parts kind of automatically adjusted, like right here. So we can print them out together collectively as like a conductor score or a master score, or just simply whatever parts that you print out, or whatever parts that you open and print out, they could be done individually as well, so each musician can get their own copy. All right, another question. Any chance the score/tab can generate guitar chords from... Sorry, just got an email from Sable. Any chance the score tab can generate chords from the chord track? Any chance the score/tab can generate guitar chords from the chord track, which already has them? So if you want to incorporate, like, let's say from the chord track and see that in the score. So I'm just going to go, not sure if we have a chord track in this project. I'm going to make one. I'm going to select the piano part here, and we'll go to our chord track, and we'll say create chord events. All right, let's see if it's... let me just select just the piano parts here. Sorry. So we'll select just a single event. All right, so we can see kind of the chords laid out for us here. So if we wanted to actually see the chord events in the score editor, all we have to do, let's say, is just come to Scores, to Advanced Layout, and say Show Chord Track. And now the chord track can be just kind of laid in. I'll just move some of these staves down here. So this way we could automatically just have the chords from the chord track populated onto the events themselves. All right, so let's go back to some of the live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, you can mail questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Let me jump back. You see Uno Memento wishing happy Independence Day for Americans. It's very kind. All right, so Bruce asks, are we doing Friday instead of Thursday this week? So yeah, we'll be on our normal Friday schedule. Then I believe the rest of July will be Tuesday and Friday. So we just wanted to make sure to get 2 live streams in for the week, so to help people out. All right, so we have Elijah Brown just saying hello, first time here. So welcome to the live stream. And if you have any questions on your Steinberg products, please just feel free to ask, and we're here to help you out. All right, and we have Club to Breathe checking in from Rio, Brazil. All right, so we see from Elijah Brown says, hey, could you show me the steps of how to go to the site and where to download is? So you could, once you purchase your license, you would get a download access code, and then all you would have to do is you could open up the Steinberg Download Assistant. So go to just Google Steinberg Download Assistant. And when you get your license, this link will be in there. So you're going to download this as a utility downloader. All right, so you'd enter your download access code here. It would show you what you have, and then it would show up under your My Products, and then you could just say, okay, I want to download Cubase Pro 12 if that's what you purchased, and then you could click on Install All, or you could install different components of the program over time. So, but you could use that as your utility, and that will, once you go to your My Steinberg account here, that would automatically populate and synchronize between the two and do the authorizations for your system. All right, so you see Ralph Nelson Tucker's going to leave to go walk the dogs, and we see Nick had to take off. So thank you for joining us today. All right, so we see Club to Breathe. Is there any way to change the Cubase keyboard maps to be one line below on a PC laptop keyboard, like instead of starting with Q to W3, like the QWERTY keyboard, start with AW SED for Cubase Pro 12? So I think it's kind of fixed, but let's go ahead and let's say I have that. Let's open up our virtual keyboard. All right, so now I think it's gonna. There isn't a way that I know of to change. And this is, I'm just using my computer keyboard here to play chromatically. So I hit like the letter Q, and let me just see if we switch this view here. So I think that this is fixed, so I don't know a way to do that, but I'll pass it along as a feature request. Okay, so we see Tomi Cease just asked, can you please make a video on how to mix loud rap vocals? Rapping really loud type. I'm having a hard time. Mix plus master if possible. Would appreciate the vid. I don't really have like kind of a rap project. If you want to share a project with me, that I could use if it's not copyrighted, and if I'm able to use it during the live stream, I'd be happy to kind of take your project and show some tips. A lot of times it's not sometimes it's not necessarily like the loudness of the vocal, but other stuff that is making the vocal not cut through the mix. So think of more often like different types of arrangements. So, I like to think of music, if we were to just come over and think of like so let's say if we looked at a particular keyboard, so I'm just going to use this piano keyboard here as a basis. So we could think, okay, I need parts to be in the lows, I need parts to be in the mid-range, and this is often where vocals would be. I need parts to be kind of maybe upper mid-range, maybe keyboard synths. I need hi-hats snare, kick, and we need to have a balance of all these particular frequencies, and and make sure that like these frequencies aren't conflicting with this. So some things you could do to make it, if you have problems with consistency in level, that could be compression to make it more consistent, so that you don't have really soft, and then really loud, and really soft and loud, and you want those to all be heard at the same level. So that could be just editing and more consistency. But if you want to share a project with me, I'd be happy to do a video on like how to get the vocals more present in your particular project. Sometimes it could be like what's done in one project could be completely different to what's needed and required to make the vocals stand out in a different project, depending upon the context. But think of try taking different instruments away and see if the vocals sound better. Figure out what is causing the vocal not to be heard. And like I remember, like one time I got to be in a room while Bob Clearmountain was mixing, and I've told this before, but he's like, just like one of those like little off the cuff comments. And it's just so brilliant. He's like, yeah, when the bass doesn't sound good in the mix, it's not the bass's fault. It's something else that's clashing. The piano player's in a way. It's an arrangement problem. So try to think of stuff like that. But if you want to share an example, please, you can send like a Dropbox or WeTransfer to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and be happy to kind of take a look at the file. We just see a discussion from Elijah just asking, with Cubase, do you have to download some add-on programs to it? I think that one of the great things with starting with Cubase is the lack of a need to have a lot of third-party add-ons, because what's included with Cubase is so much, and is so kind of complete, that you don't necessarily need to go out and buy a lot of third-party solutions for tuning or for drums, for beats, for effects and plugins, where in other programs you tend to have to buy the program, and then you have to spend a lot of money utilizing third-party tools to get the functionality that you need. So with Cubase, it's kind of self-inclusive, more so than I think other programs. So we just see from Rob, I'm not sure if this is a question, but changing the sounds within a Cubase track. So I'm not sure if you want to change sounds of an audio file or like a MIDI instrument, but you could, you could generally, program, depending on the instrument, you could send program changes to it to change instruments, or just even automate changing sounds on it. All right, so Patrick Manuel A, can I learn notation with the help of Cubase? Yeah, so definitely. So, anything that you kind of write in will automatically be notated. You don't have to be a schooled musician that reads music to get up to speed and to be able to create in Cubase. But if you wanted to learn, get a sense of what is going on, with your music and how it looks in notation, Cubase is a wonderful tool for that. Okay, I see Rob's first question. Sorry, I missed this one. Sorry about that, Rob. So we just see, hi Greg from Tarpon Springs, got a new toy, YC88. Is there a way to send patch changes to it via Midi? Okay, so really all you'd have to do is when you have a Midi track, so all you have to do at this point is just, if you want to send like patch changes in the middle, you could start off when you get to the Midi track here. You can say, okay, I'm going out to, let's say, to this port, and then you have bank and program changes that you could select here. So we could just set the different bank and program changes, but often what you could do is just select program changes, and then at this point you could just say, okay, it's going to play this sound, and then it's going to play this sound, at this particular point in time, and I want it to do a different program change, so this way over time it could just send different program changes. Okay, so we see Elijah Brown just asked, Greg, would there be a promo/discount code for people starting using this? So there currently isn't a promotional code going on for Cubase. At different times of the year, there will be different promotions. Like we just got through with WaveLab one last week. So throughout the year, there will be different promotions, but there currently isn't one starting on with Cubase currently. All right, so Michael Pierce has to get going. Thanks for joining us today for the live stream. It's always better when Michael Pierce is on. And it's so wonderful to see you, and thanks for sharing about the classical recording book and sharing your pictures on your trip to Scotland. I always like looking at other people's vacation photos and traveling vicariously through them. All right, let's see if we have, I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. Thank you, everyone, for accommodating kind of a day earlier than normal. And once again, the next live stream will be on Friday, and then we'll be back on our Tuesday and Friday schedule. All right, let's see if there's more questions. Usually about 20 to 30 seconds from when I talk to any guys here, so we'll see if there's more questions that come in. Okay, Elijah Brown just asked Greg Under when's the Zoom meeting? So we usually do the Zoom meeting on the last live stream of the month. So we had one this past Friday. The next Zoom meetup will be on, I believe it's July 28th. That'll be the next last live stream date of the month. So again, July 28th, and we usually start at about 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, which would be about noon California time. I believe it's 8 p.m. London time, 9 p.m. Central European time. All right. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. Greg, how to send one track to two different groups? Is it possible? So yeah, all you have to do is, let's take our melody here. So all you have to do is, if we add it to two groups, I'm going to add two group channels. All right, so we have so we have our guitar source here. So all I had to do is just send it to group 1 and to group 2. So So if I wanted to put like a parallel compression, like a heavy compression on this bus, so you could just send it to, you could send it up to 8 groups via aux or 8 groups via the direct routing outputs. So you can send it to any number of groups. All right, see if there's any more questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up just a couple minutes early. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions, and I have such gratitude for everyone spending time learning more about Cubase and figuring out how to use it better for their creativity so it could be realized. Appreciate everyone spending part of their morning, evening, afternoon learning about Steinberg products. And we want everyone to stay safe and healthy. And if you're celebrating 4th of July in the United States, or just we want everyone to have a great 4th of July, like we have a great day every day. So we're looking forward to it here at our household, going to our local park. And then usually some families in our neighborhood, 2 of the dads go crazy trying to outdo each other with fireworks. So we'll let them spend all the money and go see it. Just walk down the end of a street. All right. All right, so we see Olivia says hi, so thanks for joining us. All right, so with that, I guess we will go ahead and wrap up. Once again, everyone, please have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back on Friday. Everyone, again, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you on Friday. Enjoy. Goodbye.